The primary is over. Now it's on to the general election. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, the world loses two superstars, actor-comedian Robin Williams and actress Lauren Bacall. Riots and protests in Ferguson, Missouri after a young black man is shot by police. A shooting in a strip mall in Bayside leaves one man dead. Rob Manfred is elected the new commissioner of baseball to succeed Bud Selig. A recount looms in the Republican primary in the 6th Congressional District, a race that State Senator Glenn Grothman appears to have won by about 214 votes over his fellow Senator Joe Liebem. Democrats nominate Susan Happ as their candidate for Attorney General, and she will face Waukesha County District Attorney Brad Schimmel in November. Governor Scott Walker and First Lady Tonette Walker accept the Ice Bucket Challenge. Oof, that looks cold. But we start with the election that made national headlines. David Clark survives the Democratic primary. Now, this is really a remarkable story. Clark faced a $600,000 attack ad blitz. The adamant opposition of Milwaukee Democrats, including County Executive Chris Abele, Mayor Tom Barrett, and outside money from former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg's anti-gun rights organization. But in the end, Clark beat challenger Chris Mays by a margin of 52 to 48%, aided by a big Republican crossover. Now, Bloomberg may have been hoping to buy himself some headlines by defeating Clark, but these were not the headlines he wanted. In the end, the campaign to oust Clark left the sheriff emboldened and empowered and raised immediate speculation about Clark's next move. Now, joining me on the panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, former State Representative Michelle Litchens, political strategist Linda Bruin, and the managing editor of RightWisconsin.com, Colin Roth. Okay, well, let's start with you, Michael Holt. How did David Clark pull this off?
Well, you have to add in a little of the crossover vote from Republicans. The black vote was crucial. And I think a lot of people were turned off by that advertising blitz that the opponents put up in the 11th hour. Matter of fact, some of the ads, when I saw them, I thought they were racist. You know, some of the caricatures they used and some of the language they used. And I think people actually just said also that, you know, they support his law and order, you know, philosophy.
Okay, so how big was the crossover, Colin Roth?
I think it was around 30 to 35,000 votes from what we saw. And it was significant. I think talk radio played a role. And I think the Bloomberg ad blitz did a big job as far as turning Republicans out.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I agree with Colin. I think this crossover vote by the Republicans was probably the biggest crossover vote in Wisconsin that I've ever heard of, at least in the last 25, 30, 40 years. So that's a big deal. But even if you discount that, you've got a lot of moderate Democrats, particularly Southside Democrats, who went for Sheriff Clark in huge numbers. So it's not just Republican crossover. He also garnered a lot of the rank and file Democratic support as well.
Well, and I also think this is another example of how outside money shouldn't come into local elections. You think Bloomberg would have learned this in Colorado, and he didn't, but he came in here. It kind of reminded me about the whole Club for Growth thing with Mark Newman. They came in and poured a ton of money in the state of Wisconsin thinking they could help him out, and they didn't help him out either.
Well, you know, I mean, yeah, he's been on a losing streak. He hasn't won anywhere, and I'm guessing that Mayor Bloomberg thought maybe this was low-hanging fruit. Colin, you said on my radio show that Sheriff David Clark always plays the away game because, first of all, he's running in very liberal Democratic County, Milwaukee County. He's running in the Democratic primary. He's got the entire Democratic establishment against him. Mayor Bloomberg is probably thinking, this is easy. I put in $150,000, and then I claim that I have, you know, won this great triumph for gun control. It didn't work out that well for him. Now, here's my question, though, because this crossover was unprecedented. And the fact that there were more votes cast in the race for sheriff than for governor and for attorney general, that's never happened before. What would have happened if Chris Abele had not dumped in the $400,000 and Bloomberg had dumped in the $150,000?
We call that the $500,000 question, I think. But the numbers would have been lower, and compared to 2010, when there really was no crossover vote, both Clark and Mays doubled their vote totals. So Chris Mays did exceptionally well, too, as far as turning out his vote. I think there would have been a big difference, and a lot of us thought that Clark wouldn't survive.
Michael Holt. I mean, the boomerang effect. Because look, I think talk radio played a significant role. I'm not going to deny that. Obviously, I'm not. But I'll also tell you that I'm not sure that it would have had that kind of resonance if you had not had that last-minute blitz. Now, the fact that you spend $600,000, it raises questions about the judgment. First of all, I didn't think the ads were very good. I think a lot of people saw David Clark talking about self-defense and thought it was a PSA. They were not as outrageous as Chris Abele thought they would be. Number two, it's August. I'm not sure how many people saw those ads, but it was just enough to sort of rouse David Clark's base.
Now, had not talk radio linked the county executive to the money, it might have been different. But you have to also take consider maybe this is a referendum on Abele. I mean, maybe the people are speaking, say we're tired of all of this stuff, this pettiness and all the rest of this. When you get this many people standing up for.
But the unions also are losers in this because the unions, of course, backed Mays and big time, and it really in a Democratic primary in a Democratic county. It used to be that if you got 4 out of 8 unions or 6 out of 8 unions, you were home free, and Mays got everyone, or virtually everyone. And so that is a telling sign as to the power or lack of power of unions in the last several elections. And part of it is because of Act 10, but part of it is also just...
Okay, so what does David Clark... I said I think he's emboldened. I think he's bigger than he was before. What does he do with that? Where does he go?
Well, I think the first thing is that I think any chance of him caring much about what the county board and Chris Abele want to do with his budget next year, that's blown out of the water. He never really followed what they did anyway, but I think he feels emboldened there. I also think that it gives him a little bit more credibility in looking at whether he wants to run for mayor.
I think
it
so,
gives
too.
him a platform to run for mayor, and I would be
remember,
surprised if he didn't run for mayor.
the county is different than the city of Milwaukee,
True.
But I do think it really does
elevate. It will also be interesting to see how the media treats him, because as we know, the local newspaper read an editorial saying we don't take him seriously, we're going to ignore him, and I kind of wonder whether or not they'll realize the disconnect between that elite media opinion and the public opinion. What has your glass half full this week, and what has your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Well, my glass is half full because President Obama has called for calm in Ferguson, Missouri, following a series of clashes between citizens and police sparked by the killing of an unarmed black man. But my glass is half empty because few are listening to the president, and there's a good chance that that city could erupt in coming weeks. Milwaukee should pay heed.
Michelle Litchens.
Well, my glass is half empty because the press has given Mary Burke a job creator pass over the past few months, but my glass is half full because the campaign is on and hopefully the press will finally take their gloves off.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half full because Iraqi Prime Minister al-Maliki will soon resign. But my glass is half empty because he isn't the first Middle Eastern leader who put friends in key military positions to protect his government from a military coup, and he won't be the last. So there's no guarantee that Iraq's military leadership will improve with his departure.
Colin Roth.
My glass is half full because President Obama did the right thing and ordered the U.S. military to assist refugees in northern Iraq. My glass is half empty because President Obama appears unwilling to implement a broader strategy to counter the ISIS threat.
Well, my glass is half full because Green Bay Packer football is back, because in Wisconsin, football is king. My glass is half empty because my alma mater, Nicolay High School, just canceled its entire varsity football season because of lack of interest. Really? Next on Sunday Insight, who are the big winners and who were the big losers in Tuesday's primary election? Last week's primary election had its share of winners and losers on both sides of the aisle. Milwaukee County Board Chairman Marina Dmitrievich loses her bid for the state assembly. She sought to succeed John Richards, who lost his bid for Attorney General. And on the other hand, former State Senator Van Wangard looks to get his old job back, easily winning a primary in the Racine-Kenosha area. Glenn Grothman may or may not have won the 6th Congressional District primary. And then there are the folks who weren't on the ballot at all but had serious skin in the game. So let's break it down. Who were some of the biggest winners and biggest losers of the week? We'll start with you, Colin Roth.
Well, the biggest winner would have been Sheriff Clark, but I'll focus on Senator Glenn Grothman for winning a race that he was an underdog in, I think, from the beginning. He ran a very, very good campaign. He was outspent, but he closed hard with a good message. My biggest loser, I think, would be Chris Abele. He went all in on defeating Sheriff Clark, lost, and he had 2 assembly candidates that he also backed and lost.
Yeah, he went 0 for 3.
Yeah.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, the biggest winners, I think, are David Clark, Glenn Grothman, if he wins, and you, quite frankly, even though you weren't on the race, because I think you had a major impact on both Sheriff Clark's election as well as Glenn Grothman's. And I think that that is a major signal of how this electorate is moving and who they're listening to and where they're going, conservatively or not. So I think that's a big deal. I think Susan Happ is a big winner, as well as the Democratic Party, because now we have a prosecutor who's going to run against a Republican prosecutor challenger, and I think in the end that's going to make for a more competitive race. And my last big winner is Jonathan Brostoff in the 19th Assembly District. I worked with him on the county board. He was a staffer there. He is a very bright, very policy-oriented, and very nice guy, and I think I'm glad he did well.
Michelle Litchens.
A winner that many people down here might not remember, we had a gentleman run in Howard Markline's seat who is openly gay. So we have a Republican openly gay assembly candidate this year, and I think he's going to be very successful in that race. Some of the losers, though, that we don't have necessarily in this area, but are the Republicans who signed the recall petition, who ran all over the state. They all lost in their primaries, and one of them was extremely capable of holding the position of county clerk.
Brown County clerk of courts. Okay, biggest winners and
one of the
losers.
biggest winners as relates to the Central City was David Bowen, who won in the 10th district. I thought that Bria Grant, who was independent and a supporter of school choice, would win, but some of those same folks who said we didn't need black representation supported David Bowen, and so he gets in there. And then of course there's Grothman, of course, if he wins. But the big losers was Richards. I mean, that was. I mean, all the establishment were pushing him. They were putting money in the last 24 hours in the whole ball of wax.
Well, I agree with everybody, and I won't go for the obvious ones. I think that one of the most impressive victories on election night, which I thought he would win, I did not think he would win by the big margin, Van Wangard, who lost his seat in a recall election, was facing a very, very aggressive challenge from Jonathan Stites, and he ends up getting more than 70% of the vote. Right. This guarantees that he's going back. That's obviously a big win. I mean, Glenn Grothman, if he wins, that's going to be a huge win. Losers, I would just want to call out the organizations that Colin Roth refers to as the paper tigers. Voces de la Frontera went all in for Chris Mays, and it turned out they didn't generate many votes whatsoever. They generated a backlash, and I think there are a number of organizations on
aptitude. When they changed his statement on their website, it just signaled that they were.
But there are a lot of organizations out there on both the right and the left that look big in social media and claim that they have a lot of clout, but when it comes down to it, they're exposed in elections as kind of big hat, no cattle. You may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who contributed $150 in an unsuccessful effort to oust Sheriff David Clark. If you have so much money to waste, I could use a few dollars to support the Malik Holt Scholarship Fund.
Michelle.
To companies who want to give their loyal customers a gift, know your customer, and don't do this. Land's End regulars received a gift of GQ magazine with an almost naked woman on the cover. Not their customer.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my advice is to Republican congressman whose GOP base heavily supports trying to impeach President Obama. Go ahead, go for it. When John Boehner announced that the House would sue the president, House Democrats raised more than $7.6 million by midweek. If you try to impeach President Obama, the Democratic Party will immediately raise millions to keep Democrats in office to fight a fight that you started but can't win.
Colin Roth.
To Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abley, next time maybe find something more useful to spend $400,000 on than a petty and vindictive attempt to defeat a sheriff you don't like.
Yeah, there's a theme here. My unsolicited advice is to former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Thanks for stopping by, Mike. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Next on Sunday Insight, surprises from Tuesday's primary. There was not much suspense at the top of the ticket. Democrat Mary Burke won her primary challenge and will face Governor Scott Walker in November. But there were some upsets and some shockers in races around the state. The pundits, including some of us here, didn't always get it right. So anything that really surprised you about last Tuesday's primary, Michelle Litchens?
You know, mentioning that, the fact that Mary Burke did not have a victory party was really surprised. You would have thought that she would have used that. Oh, sorry. John Lehman, running for lieutenant governor, was almost beat by a no-name protester who spent $1,000. That's crazy. Glenn Grothman doing as well as he did in the 6th Congressional District. He was the underdog. He was thought to come in third. He didn't have the money, but he worked really hard. He sent out a lot of mail, and he might have won that race.
Okay, you got to help me with this one because she actually took my surprise. I still cannot figure out why Mary Burke did not have an election night party. Every candidate, you win an election, you have the party, you get the TV cameras in. She would have been on every 10 o'clock news program. She would have been on the front page of every newspaper in the state. She would have been on the morning news. She was invisible. She was at a fundraiser in Rhinelander. Who does that, Linda Bruin?
A political neophyte. And what I'm surprised about is that when you're running for governor, you have advisors who may be more politically in tune and experienced. And I don't understand either they didn't tell her to do this or she didn't listen. And I don't know which it is.
Okay, what surprised you?
I think what surprised me is the loss of every major candidate in a contested race that Chris Abele wanted to win, and the winning of every major candidate in a contested race that he wanted to lose. I mean, he couldn't get it right on either side, and that to me was surprising.
Okay, Colin Roth.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the lieutenant governor's race on the Democratic side was fascinating to see. Mary Jo Walters, somebody who's raised and spent just over $1,000, get 116,000 votes statewide. There may have been some Republican mischief here in Milwaukee.
Okay, Michael Holt.
I can just basically ditto what everybody said, including. But you know, on the flip side, when Mary Burke, you could theoretically say that maybe she's getting bad advice from advisors because remember when President Obama arrived, she dissed him and went to the other side of the state.
So this is not the first time she's gone missing.
But on the flip side, you say maybe it was a shrewd political move because we're talking about it. And it did make the front page of every newspaper that she didn't hold this election victory party.
Yeah, but the tradition is always also that you get a bump out of a primary election. She's the first woman to be nominated. This was the ultimate freebie. I mean, this was a tap-in, a 2-inch putt that she missed. Okay, I was surprised, I will admit. I was surprised at the magnitude of the crossover vote for David Clark. I mean, I was hoping for it, but I was surprised by it. I am also continued to be surprised by the inability of some counties to count the freaking votes. What is it? I mean, is there something in the water in Waukesha County and Sheboygan County that we have to wait until 3 in the morning? You would think it's 2014, people. So what is it you don't get? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
What I think it is, you have an open congressional race with 3 philosophically similar candidates, and voters choose Glenn. I'm opposed to Martin Luther King holiday. Grothman?
Get used to it. Michelle Litchens.
Charlie, what I don't get, and Michael disagrees with me on this, is why when a white man kills a black man, there are riots in the streets, but when a black man kills another black man or kills a black child in the crossfire, why all we hear are crickets?
Linda Bruin.
In Afghanistan, American soldiers were only allowed to point their weapons at armed opponents because pointing their guns at unarmed civilians would likely escalate a gathering into a riot. So what I don't get is if our generals won't allow American soldiers to point guns at unarmed foreign civilians in a war zone, what makes it okay for the Ferguson, Missouri police to point guns at unarmed Americans in an American city?
Colin Roth.
I'm with you on this one, Charlie. What I don't get is how close elections in this state always seem to find clerks who can't post results until the wee hours of the morning. I'm looking at you, Sheboygan.
Well, what I don't get is, whatever happened to good old-fashioned charities where you just wrote out a check? So why do I have to have a bucket of ice water dumped on my head? And what was I thinking when I agreed? Next on Sunday Insight, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. First, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
The winner, obviously, David Clark, who proved that black folks will occasionally vote for a candidate not endorsed by the Madison and Milwaukee Bosses Club. My losers, all of those political interests, who assumed we would automatically tap dance to their tune.
Michelle Litchens.
Well, my winner this week is the State Fair, who reported record attendance this year. Thank you for providing me with chocolate-covered bacon, deep-fried peanut butter cups, and horse shows, and cows and cream puffs. Wisconsin knows how to run a fair. My loser is high school football in Wisconsin. The fact that boys soccer is during the same season as football, and today parents fear injuries far more than in the past. Maybe soccer will become a national sport after all.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my winners are the thousands of Yazidis who escaped on foot in a grueling journey to northern Kurdistan, and the Iraqi and American airstrikes on ISIS positions, which broke the siege and allowed the many Yazidis to escape. My losers are all of us who are Robin Williams fans. This generous, kind-hearted man was a comic genius and an Oscar-winning, exquisite performer. His suicide is a tragic reminder that depression can be a deadly disease.
Colin Roth.
My winner is Captain Ron Johnson. He bravely and calmly broke the cycle of violence in Ferguson, Missouri, and provided a fine example of how law enforcement should behave in a volatile and tense situation. My loser is Voces de la Frontera. Your get out the vote effort for Chris Mays completely failed, and your radical positions probably helped drive more Republicans to cross over to vote for Sheriff Clark. Nice work.
Well, my loser, Chris Abele, could have bought himself another vacation house with the amount of money he spent trying to defeat Sheriff David Clark. Instead, he doesn't even get a lousy T-shirt. Winner, David Clark. He not only survived, he's emboldened and empowered, and the cowboy hat still drives liberals absolutely nuts. So keep wearing it, Sheriff. Thanks for joining us, and join me for my radio show Monday morning. It's on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.
Download the new Radio